Well, since it's almost the one time of the year where you can play Vamp Anthem in a public setting, I figured this was a perfect time as any to talk about one of my favorite albums of last year, Playboi Carti's Whole Lotta Red. And yeah, I like the album a lot, and I know a lot of people who really don't, but I hope this video can get people who hate on this album to at least admire its place in hip-hop as a whole, and how I think it's going to influence the future of the genre. I obviously want to slide in some praise for this truly amazing piece of work throughout, but this video is going to be taking on a more analytical approach to the music here. What it means for rap, what it means for Carti, how it ties into music of the past, stuff like that. So without further ado, let's explore the wonderful world of Red. Now, if we're going to actually get into the content of this album, we have to first talk about its structure. Whole Lotta Red is less of an album than it is an experience, and despite how corny that sounds, it's kind of true. Many songs here thrive best in the context of the album, and narrowly span more than 2 minutes in length. Essentially, if you're looking for standalone tracks, you're gonna have a pretty hard time with this album outside of a few singular cuts like Rockstar Made and Metamorphosis. Additionally, the album is basically split in two. The first half is very centered around this punk trap aesthetic Carti was leaning into heavily with the marketing of this record. So here we get ridiculously overstated vocals, chant-like repetition, and some of the most violent and sexual bars of the whole album. However, at the exact center of the record, we switch into a new, if familiar, style, essentially the natural evolution of Carti's classic sound. Here the beats become less punk-inspired and more Nintendo soundtrack, but in a good way. If you don't believe me, just take a look at the two vampire-centric songs of the record. We have Vamp Anthem, the song which literally loops the classic vampire organ theme and closes out Whole Lotta Red's first side, and then we have King Vamp, which honestly sounds like Carti rapping over the theme music for a late 90s racing game, and that comes on the album's second half. So if we're going to look at the release, we really do have to split it into two separate sections and then examine those on their own. So first off, let's talk about what is easily my favorite part of the record, the abrasive and experimental rock-inspired half one. To start at the start, Rockstar Made is honestly one of the best hip-hop openers, period. Even if you don't think it sounds good, that's still a statement which I think stands, since the track is such a perfect summation of what's to come. It literally is Carti's character on this album. Everything from that opening beat, distorted to no end and so loud that you have to turn it down. The chorus literally stating Carti's mindset that his life is, quote, never too much. I mean, it is the album. When I think of Whole Lotta Red, I imagine this song and I immediately want to go experience the record again. Just to dwell on those people who really can't stand this album, I understand why so many just turned it off after song 1 on drop night. Rockstar Made is extremely bold, especially as an album opener. Everything I just mentioned makes the song, to me at least, a real statement that the old Carti is all but dead on this half, and I'm sure that's why so many people felt wronged by this opening track. On the lyrical side of things, I don't think there's really much to explain. Carti tackles basic topics of trap music such as violence, wealth, and sex in a way which almost renders them meaningless. In fact, if you go to Genius, there are like 2 annotations for this entire song, and that's for good reason. Carti's vocals and energy help to play his lyrics up as almost mocking, like he's fawning about these horrific things without a care in the world. And that's what it's supposed to represent. When Carti is screaming at the top of his lungs about being rockstar made and burying ops, I think the theatrical side of the album starts to become clear. Everything from the cover to the name to the rollout was to paint this weird, flamboyant mixture of classic rockstar and trap icon. Carti is really just inhaling all his influences, taking the darkest parts of them all, and spitting back out a vile and entertaining character. And that's track 1. Now, I won't dwell on these other songs for very long since I've already said so much, but to really summarize the remaining tracks on this half of the album, I think all are effective in their own special ways. While they never really reach the same singular height that is Rockstar Made, when combined together, the experience of the next 11 songs informs the image portrayed through track 1. To give some honest criticisms, I do leave songs like Go to the Moon and Metamorphosis feeling like the featured artists don't really match Carti's style exactly. I do feel robbed by the fact that No Sleep and New Tank are criminally short, and I do think some tracks like Jump Out the House are more experiment than real song. But when I listen to all the tracks together, these problems kind of vanish. The features become small breaks from this larger rage that is Carti. The short songs get right to their point and keep the hype going with their brevity, and Jump Out the House just becomes awesome. Like, I really can't overstate that this album functions best as an album. However, a few songs do kind of stand out of their placement on the record, specifically Stop Breathing, which is a definite sister song to Rockstar Made, and while I think it's somewhat illusion-breaking to hear about real people and real violence on this song, I can't deny that it has one of the best hooks on the record for sure. I'll also reference Teen X, which is probably the best thing here other than Rockstar Made. The beat is thumping from the first second, the focus on drugs helps the song to feel cohesive, and Future somehow matched Carti's energy perfectly with his performance. In a kind of funny turn of events, Slayer, the most single-like song on this entire first half, feels the most out of place. I definitely wouldn't say it's bad though, and even in the context of the record, I think it's dope to see Carti bringing in this softer side of himself, playing up the flamboyance and performative aspects of his character. Maybe it doesn't fit exactly, but in some weird meta way, I think this probably contributes to just how little this first half cares about what listeners really think. And with the 12th song, a fitting anthem to all this vampiry, Carti shuts out the first half, and honestly, I think it stands on its own. It's very consistent in its aesthetic and provides a truly interesting portrayal of a twisted and unique character. Basically Gucci Mane meets Ozzy Osbourne, the most performative sides of two genres mixing together to create something all its own. I mean, to use the mixing as an example, I can't really tell what it reminds me of more. The wall of sound approach from bands like My Bloody Valentine, where the vocals literally fuse with the music, or like a 2013 Chief Keef mixtape. I'm talking like almighty so levels of just abrasive mixing. It's something that I think is really cool. And finally, I think it's time for us to move on to the album's hazy, psychedelic second half. I remember the day after I heard Whole Lotta Red, I came up with a perfect descriptor of the record's second side. If half one is the punk trap trail being blazed by Carti, then the final 12 songs are the natural progression of his classic work. They are, to a pretty large extent, what many people expected Whole Lotta Red to be. I for one remember well the build up to this record, hearing Carti drop snippets of Kid Cudi on the infamous leak Kid Cudi, and expecting much of the record to take shape as a pretty natural evolution of Carti's previous work. While the album's first half came as a wonderful surprise, I'm immensely glad Carti changed it up halfway through. It helps to keep the album truly fresh and diverse throughout. I think a pretty concise mission statement for this half comes from the opening song, New Neon, which is pretty ironically an old Carti leak, basically something you'd hear on Die Lit 2.0. New Neon is highly indicative of the record from this point on, where the bragging and debauchery of the first half was aggressive and violent. Here it's muddled, almost like it's spilling out of Carti's mouth alongside pints of lean and prescription pills. Now, with the precedent of the first half in place, and Carti's image painted as one of a truly reprehensible character, it's reasonable to expect the second half to grapple with that reality, and on the surface, it does. For example, Control sees Carti rapping "I've been losing control" over and over. However, upon deeper inspection, we can come to see this as merely a reference to going crazy about a girl. And this entire side possesses that signature brand of trap bragging as a cry for help. You've probably seen it from people like Chief Keef. His song Save Me comes to mind, where Keef raps over a Katy Perry sample which alludes to both the cries of his victims and his own struggle to escape a dark existence. To highlight some prominent examples on Whole Lotta Red, take this line from Sky, where Carti says, "I told my boy, go roll like 10 blunts for me, I'm trying to get high till I can't feel nothing." Or this one from Place, "I just popped a Xan, can't feel my face." Now, this can seem like basic trap stuff, and it really is, but the fact that Carti spits it all over beats meant to highlight the sluggish and druggy bars to an unnatural extent lets us know that he's definitely suffering, even when it's not explicitly spelled out. Of course, there are also songs here where Carti's struggle is made very apparent in clear terms. Punk Monk goes into detail about Carti's failures to sign some of his peers and how that built a serious sense of distrust within him, and while Control is an all-out love ballad, the relationship established there seems to be challenged in some later tracks. I Love You, I Hate You explores the dual sides of love. One second Carti is rapping "Baby, don't get too close," and the next he's saying "She want a party, she want young Carti," while Over has about as clear of a statement on lost affection as is possible, with Carti rapping "This love don't feel how it felt when we started." So basically this whole second half is just a mess, but an intentional one. Sometimes we're drowning in this haze of substance use, and other times Carti is coming as close to ranting on a song as he ever has. The beats are trippy, but almost to a jarring extent. They become unpredictable and oversaturated. Place even cuts out entirely for a solid 5 seconds. And despite the pretty freeform and repetitive nature of this final stretch, The closing song, Feel Like Dying, does hold some serious weight in the context of the record. It's here that we're presented with essentially two types of death for Carti. One literal death from drugs and vice, referential to Lil Wayne's classic song I Feel Like Dying, and another metaphorical death brought about by Carti's love for a woman. With commitment and perseverance, Carti believes he can kill that dark rock star living inside him. I don't want to try to tie this at all with Carti's life, but I do think it's fair to mention that the release of Whole Lotta Red saw him breaking up with his longtime partner and the mother to his child, a split which seemed to have been informed almost entirely by Carti's personal failings, so maybe the rock star side won. Feel Like Dying is a pretty scattered song on the lyrical front, only held together by the beautiful Bon Iver sample that runs throughout the track. With this sample, Carti is able to speak on both his failings and aspirations for the future. To quote, I stood a little while within it, man, you have to know the way it goes. While Whole Lotta Red is anything but a concept album, it does pull itself together in the final moments to make a statement. Again, if we look towards the record as an experience to be had, then we come to the final track with fragments of a character which meld into something more. Rockstar Made ties Carti to the punk lifestyle, Stop Breathing references his trap side, Control introduces his desires for love, Punk Monk explores his distrust of others, etc., etc. And it snowballs into this ending which somehow works perfectly, a collage of aspirations, desires, and personal failings that rounds out the album wonderfully and acts as one of the most emotionally powerful things Carti has ever made. And that's really what I get from the album. It's a detailed portrait of an interesting character Carti is trying to portray. But how does the record tie into wider music? What about this unique piece of work can we expect to see reflected in years to come? Well, firstly, I think the way this was actually marketed will be important. Whole Lotta Red, even before its release, had a clear aesthetic to it, and with the album being as experience heavy as it is, I think it basically serves as a soundtrack to that aesthetic. I could, if all the posts were still up, go to Carti's Instagram and basically soundtrack each of his pictures with a song from the album. The rollout and the vibe of the rollout is essential to understanding the record. This isn't like, say, Astroworld, where the aesthetic is definitely present, but not really key to the album as a whole. You could show someone Astroworld in a vacuum and they'll probably love it, but show a Whole Lotta Red to someone without the aesthetic, and even if they enjoy it, bringing on the pictures and the culture which accompanied the album's release will definitely make the experience click even more. And this is definitely something I feel as though we're seeing more of in music right now. Two examples I can think of are Olivia Rodrigo's Sour and Isaiah Rashad's The House is Burning. These albums are cool, but add in their aesthetics and they click. Sour especially is built on the back of this early 2000s, late 90s imagery. I don't think Carti necessarily started this, but I think it would be wrong to assume that every musician watching his rollout wasn't taking notes. Trippie Redd is trying to build an aesthetic with his music right now, one very similar to Carti's. It happened with Kanye's Donda. However, Kanye really might have set this stuff off in the first place. I mean, Yeezus is tied to the interviews and outfits and performances Kanye was doing at the time to no end. Aesthetics are becoming the driving force in music, especially with the current maintenance of playlists and other avenues of constructing them, and Carti's contributions to this new musical movement definitely won't be forgotten. And it's a good thing that we reference Yeezus, because people have described the music on Whole Lotta Red as basically the second coming of Yeezus. See what I did there? But anyway, I think this could totally be true. Carti's style on the record is already transforming modern music. I mean, Punk Monk was at the top of the TikTok charts the other week, and I think the polarizing nature of the record is going to lead a lot of people who like it to really guard it and want to draw from it in a meaningful way. I look towards the album as a kind of successful version of Eternal Take, an album I was pretty excited for at the time of its release and wound up really just not liking at all. Lil Uzi Vert tried to build an aesthetic with the album when I don't really remember well. He attempted to make it semi-conceptual with all this space stuff, but none of the beats or lyrics or deliveries make me feel that coming through. Meanwhile, Carti did all this stuff to great effect. Every aspect of Whole Lotta Red helps to contribute towards its performance. Unlike Eternal Take, I think Carti's record really lived up to the hype and provided something that will have a massive effect on the landscape of trap going forward. It's interesting that Carti chose punk to market his album with, because I do see a lot of punk ethos in this record's first half. While it isn't very preoccupied with politics, the short songs, broken production, and focus on general experience present within Whole Lotta Red make it about as close to trap punk as I think we're going to get. The second half is a less drastic overhaul of the Carti style and more soft reboot, yet it's a change nonetheless. What we're ultimately left with is a forward-thinking album which can be read as both a continuation of Carti's old style and a complete abandonment of it. Not only is the album a metamorphosis for Carti, it's one for all of trap. The style presented here is truly something new and revolutionary in the genre, and while only time will tell, who knows, every rapper might be a vamp before too long. And that's the video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. This is easily one of my absolute favorite albums out there, and whether you love it or hate it, I hope I was able to at least open your mind to it just a bit. Don't forget to drop a like or a subscription for more content in the future. I have a bunch of cool stuff planned. So yeah, until next time, peace.